Namaste and welcome to Nepal Next. My guest today has many feathers on his cap. He's a journalist, a poet, a writer, a philanthropist and a politician. Former head of BBC Nepali, founder of Help Nepal Network and the president of Vivekshil Saja Party, it is a pleasure to be talking with Mr. Ravindra Mishra today. Welcome to the show.
And it's a pleasure to talk to you as well, Sadisha ji.
Thank you so much for taking the time out and being here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Congratulations on the new book, first of all.
Thank you very much. It's been just about a week or 10 days
of the release.
Yeah.
How, I'm sure it's always different whenever you jot down your thoughts and prepare a new book. Can you take us through what the experience was like for this one?
For this particular one, actually what happened was I was already into politics.
Right.
One fine day, the famous Vijay Kumar Pandey, I had a meeting with him and he was the group editor of the Annapurna publications at that time. And he suddenly, unexpectedly proposed that I should write a column for the newspaper and he will be paying me the highest amount in the country.
That has been ever paid for a columnist.
Yeah, for a columnist and far more than what, usually is paid for the writers here. So I was a bit confused and he wanted me to write a weekly column and I said no because I'm into politics and I'm really busy nowadays. But I would be keen to write a fortnightly column. So I started this column and then, I continued for 1.5 years. And looking back at what I had written in 1.5 years, I felt that there were lots of issues, political, social and other kinds of issues which could be collected into a book. And we didn't have shelf value. I mean, it had a long-term value. So Fine Print, which had published my 2 books earlier, they were very keen to publish it. So it came out.
That's how it happened.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, you've been in politics for about 4 years, if
Yes.
I'm not wrong, right? What do you think, where do you think Nepal is in terms of democracy? Do you think we have fully achieved the values of democracy or is there still room for some improvement?
There will always be room for improvement in any kind of democracy anywhere in the world. So there is always a room for improvement. But the fact of the matter is, to be honest, and I'm sorry to say this, Nepal's democracy is more of an anarchy than a democracy. I mean, laws, the constitution, all these things, yes, it is there. But basically, they are there for the weak ones. They are there for people who are helpless. But they don't usually apply for people who are powerful, who are in position, who are very, very rich. And this is seen all over the places. So it's kind of pseudo-democracy,
So from pseudo-democracy to something that you talk about, welfare democracy or a welfare state, what exactly is welfare state to our young viewers who'd want to know more about it? Why is it relevant or important in a country like Nepal?
Okay, let me talk about the democracy first. We emphasize in 4 particular values, which we call STEAM, system, transparency, integrity, and meritocracy.
Right.
We call it STEAM. If we could incorporate these 4 elements into a democracy, obviously that democracy would function properly. There will be a system working, and then the people who run the system are full of integrity, which happens in lots of Western countries and developed countries. And it will be transparent and it will promote meritocracy. Because without promoting meritocracy and integrity, there is no country in the world which has transformed. Okay, so that is the part of democracy. When democracy is combined with welfare state, it becomes welfare democracy. Right? And welfare state is something which has been practiced with this particular term used in lots of countries and without being used in a country like America. Lots of people think that America is, it's a capitalist country and it's very self-centered. The market is all, open and anyone can do anything. It's not just like that.
Right.
Even in America, there are lots of aspects in the society which are looked after by the state. When people are weak, when they are helpful, they have to rely on the state on the government. And if the state can care for those kind of things, that is called welfare state. For example, in the case of Nepal or in any Scandinavian countries or lots of other countries where elements of welfare state are implemented, public education and public health is free, and then it has a very good quality as well. Because without free and good quality public education, no country in the world can develop. So, for example, if you see the history of Japan, South Korea, China, or now Bhutan, Singapore, and lots of Arab countries now, in the process of development, when they get into the path of development, rapid development, the first thing they focus is on public education, because without producing competent human resource, you can't change anything. So those are the kind of things which welfare democracy focuses on. Along with that, obviously, the social security part, and then the public transportation part, and housing, low-cost housing for poor people. Those are the things it will take care of.
But there's also, definitely there are always two sides to a coin, and there's also a segment of society that says this welfare democracy or welfare state per se will also put a huge burden on the state. What do you say to that?
That is true, but we can't get into we can't practice something which lots of developed countries or rich countries are practicing. Yes, when the country is poor, then the extent of welfareism will be according to the same level.
All right.
Otherwise, if you just go on distributing the wealth in the name of helping the poor and the needy, obviously the state will go.
The burden will be too much.
The burden will be too much. It will collapse. So that is not possible. So slowly, as the country gets rich, the facilities will increase. But when it is poor, we have to manage in similar way. But the one thing I have always been emphasizing is, in terms of quality of public education, public health, and there can be no compromise. There can be no compromise. You use austerity measures, you save budget from other areas, you cut down budgets on several aspects of the governance and spend on public health and public education because there can be no compromise in it.
Definitely. And with the recent second wave of the pandemic that's going on as well, we really see how important it is to have a solid healthcare system, which our country is definitely lacking.
When it happens, then you realize. Okay, it's the same case in public education as well. Because, I went to public schools, not in Kathmandu, but in the far west of Nepal, in Doti and Darchula. And when I went to those schools didn't even have bench and chairs. I literally sat on what we traditionally call sukul, the mattress, and studied. And one interesting thing which I have mentioned in lots of Nepali interviews is, if one student passed the SLC exam with good results, then there used to be a celebration in the whole bazaar. That was the kind of situation when I went to school. And recently I went to the same region again in the far west. I went to all the 9 districts. And still it's almost the same. Yes, the infrastructure may have been slightly better. There could have been, there are benches and chairs in the classrooms.
But what
the
about quality teachers?
of the education
Right.
is still very low. And at one point, there were students like 5 to 7, 8 years students who were walking 3 hours to go to school, where they would spend about 4 to 5 hours and then walk back home for which would take about 3.5 hours. And just imagine if it was, my child, if it was your, brothers and sisters,
Right.
how you would feel.
Definitely.
That they walk to school for 3 hours, they take 3 hours to come back, they don't have anything to eat throughout the day.
Definitely.
So those kind of things, are extremely important. Just because you and I am born in Kathmandu, we get better facilities, and just because someone is born in far-flung areas, they get nothing.
Definitely. Every time I travel, I acknowledge the privilege that I have, 100%.
Exactly.
Whenever we even travel 100 kilometers outside Kathmandu, you see how different their life is altogether. And I really feel blessed to be slightly more fortunate compared to others. But as you mentioned, it's not anybody's fault that they were born far away from the capital, because of
Exactly.
which they need to
Exactly.
compromise on health and education per se.
Yeah.
And I feel like politics or government or politics is definitely a key factor in changing all of that and changing the face of the nation. And young people should, personally, I feel they should definitely be interested in politics. But if you look at our country in Nepal, I would say a lot of young people aren't, because of what has happened in the past, how the young people have always been disappointed. Why do you think is that, and how can we change it?
Because even young people like yourself, who have a very good educational background, and who can actually play a catalytic role in everything that they might do, even they aren't interested. And I have tried with you several times. Let's sit and talk about politics.
Right.
And it is your generation which has been brought up with this notion of I hate politics.
Exactly. And
They are
politics is a dirty game.
Dirty game.
Yeah.
And they are interested in lifestyle, they are interested in media, they are interested in entertainment and other
Aspects.
aspects. But they simply don't care about politics. But the fact of the matter is, the quality of the jacket that you are wearing is connected somehow to the politics of the country. Okay? The quality of the makeup that you wear is connected to the quality of the politics in the country. How? Because if the country is rich, obviously your income would be higher. If your income is higher, obviously you wear better jackets, you wear better makeups. Okay? And if it is not, you'll have to think about every penny that you spend.
Definitely.
How much you earn working in this company or any other company in the future is determined by the level of, the income of the country.
Right.
For example, South Korea, per capita income is about $30,000 a year. In Nepal, it is just $1,000. 50, 60 years ago, it was almost the same. Nepal and South Korea had almost the same per capita income. Now, a person working in a restaurant in South Korea can take a break in a year and, carry a backpack and come to Nepal, travel the world. Because what he earns, he can save and travel. Here, working in a restaurant, you can't even survive, right? So young people need to realize this. When they graduate, if the country is rich, obviously their level of income would be high. If it is not, what they earn would be so small that they will find it difficult to survive. And because of the dirtiness of the politics in Nepal for the past so many decades, people just are disinterested.
Exactly.
They are just disinterested. And one thing Barack Obama did in America when he won the 2008 elections was he targeted the young people, and over 65% of the young voters voted for Barack Obama at that time, voted for the Democratic Party. So that is how change will come. In Nepal, on the day of the voting election, young people would rather sit with friends, enjoy, have fun, and they would avoid going to the voting booth. They shouldn't do that. They should come and vote because it is connected to their future. Otherwise, they will have to walk in this polluted city all the time, live in this polluted city, and not in a good house, not having a good income.
But don't you also think the reason why young people aren't interested in politics is because they've been tricked too many times by many sheeps who wear lions' clothing?
Yeah.
What do you personally can say that you've done differently or will do differently for that interest in politics for the young people to always be there and maybe even participate like you did?
That is a very, very difficult task, and that is one of the major challenges for us because, as you said, they have been tricked too many times, and when you have been tricked too many times, you lose the belief.
Yes.
You
lose faith. Yeah.
You lose faith. You stop trusting anyone. You see, anywhere, if someone is cheated everywhere he or she goes, obviously the first thing that comes to his or her mind is,
they're all liars.
They are all liars and I might be cheated again. That is exactly the kind of society we are living in and the kind of politics we are in. Mm-hmm. To break that, what I suggest to young voters especially is that, please look at the background of the people who are giving you the promises. If you look at me or my colleagues in my party and think that, no, these people can be liars as well, yes, don't vote for us. But look at our background, do some research, and if we have lived our life in the past with all the tricks and all the lies and all the corruption and all that, obviously you shouldn't vote us. Otherwise, the background is the basis on which you should make your judgment.
Right. Having contested in elections, what do you think is required to win the heart and the vote of the people?
There are two sides. On one side is that our party or myself, we need to make the voters believe that what we are saying is actually genuine. Mm-hmm. Our agendas are strong. We are actually concerned about the country. We are actually concerned about the society, the people, and we really are determined to transform this country. So our agenda, as I said, the major agenda, the anti-corruption agenda, the public health, the public education, the social security, all these agenda and the economic, stimulation, which will create jobs. Right. All those things, those agenda, we have to convey to the people in a way that they would trust us. That is one side. The other side is, I often use this phrase, Stockholm Syndrome. This is something like in 1973, some people, were taken hostage in Stockholm, and they were obviously treated badly. But as they were treated badly, they developed a kind of emotional bonding
within themselves
with the hostage takers,
right.
Okay, who captured them, and that is known as the Stockholm Syndrome. They were giving pain to them, they were hurting them, they were giving hard time, but they developed a kind of emotional bonding which they couldn't dissociate with. Mm-hmm. Nepali society, in terms of politics, is suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. The current politicians for decades are giving very hard time to everyone, to the society, to the people in the entire country. But the bonding is such that they can't break it. And ultimately, they go and vote for them. And they suffer the pain for the next 5 years. They keep on complaining on social media if they use it. And still, after 5 years, they go and vote the same people. So that kind of situation has to be penetrated and has to be broken as well.
So, like you mentioned, young voters also need to do proper research and not just believe what they see, do a proper background research on our own as well and see the activities, because actions do speak louder than word.
Exactly. The young voters, apart from studying very hard, engaging in the areas that they are interested in, they should definitely take interest in politics if they are not in politics. If they are in politics, that's a different thing. They are already interested in politics and
That's
they are
why
trying
they're
to,
there, right.
they are why they are there. But even if they are not into politics, they should take interest in politics because that is directly connected with their future, with their quality of life, with their parents' welfare, with their children's education and health, everything.
Right.
So they can't say, I hate politics. They should learn from what happened in America in 2008.
Now, coming again to clean and dirty politics, when you resigned from BBC Nepali to join politics, here's a quote which was said by you on why you moved to politics is to create a common platform to bring together honest and capable Nepalese from all walks of life for the sake of clean politics to transform Nepal. What is clean politics? Why is the politics in Nepal so dirty, and how can we, filter this?
Clean politics, earlier in the interview, I mentioned our core values: esteem, system,
Right.
transparency, integrity, and meritocracy. That is what clean politics is about. Mm-hmm. If there is a system in place, if it is transparent, if you are accountable, if the people who run the system have high moral values, which is so usual, you don't have to expect that in developed countries. That is a given. It has to be there. We don't even have to talk about it a lot. And if it doesn't happen, then immediately, there is the law to act against them. But in the case of Nepal, it is different. So those values have to be practiced in politics, and without those values, I don't think, not only in words but in action, I don't think politics will be clean.
In these past 4 years, how have you personally practiced clean politics?
I mean, personally, I consider myself a person of high integrity, and honestly, it might sound too idealistic, but I am a patriot. I think about my country, I think about the society, because I believe that you can't have an island of prosperity in a sea of poverty. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't survive for long. People think that you are rich, you are a billionaire, and that's life, you enjoy it. But I have questioned several billionaires in Kathmandu. The pollution in Kathmandu doesn't distinguish between a billionaire and a person who is walking on the street. So if the city is dirty, you will suffer as well. Your money isn't going to help you.
True.
It doesn't help you. And there are lots of other examples. I mean, this interview obviously is only half an hour, so I don't want to get into everything.
So let's talk about politics and philanthropy. You're also a philanthropist, the founder of Help Nepal Network. How does politics and philanthropy go together?
If politics is practiced with high integrity and high moral values, that is the highest form of philanthropy. Mm-hmm. Philanthropy has a limited boundary. For example, I was involved with Help Nepal Network for nearly 2 decades until I resigned from the BBC and got into politics because I dissociated at that time. We built about 65 classrooms and libraries, and we have a children's home in Dhulikhel where there are 22 girl child, and then we did lots of other things. So in 10 years, 20 years, we are able to build about 65 classrooms and libraries. But there are 30,000 government schools in Nepal, and few years ago I talked to one of the officials in the Ministry of Education, and he was telling me that about 25,000 schools don't even have a thing called library. So you can imagine, if politics is practiced properly with a single signature, actually you can build libraries in thousands of schools in one go. With philanthropy, it takes years. It gives you a huge sense of satisfaction.
Definitely.
Obviously, that makes society more civilized, and it develops empathy, and it's a good thing. It is needed in the society, and all developed society practice philanthropy a lot. That's good. But then that is not enough to transform the whole country, for which politics is absolutely necessary. Clean politics is absolutely necessary.
All right. So we've talked a lot about politics, philanthropy, and coming towards the end of the interview,
Sure.
our conversation. My last question to you would be, without any limitations, without any boundaries, if you can just close your eyes and imagine a Nepal after 10 years, how would that Nepal be?
After 10 years, if Vivekshil Saja Party comes into power, obviously we'll get the country back in track so that we can focus on, infrastructure, we can focus on public education, we can focus on public health, and we can focus on issues which actually matter to public and which will help transform this country in our generation. And when you say a generation, that usually covers 30 years.
So in our lifetime, we'll be able to see real change.
That is what we want, and we need support from people like youths like yourself.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mishra, for taking this time out and having a lovely conversation with me.
Thank you so much, Sadishadi. Thank you so much, and I wish all the best to Nepal Live today.
Thank you so much. With this, we come towards the end of interesting interview where we got to learn a lot about politics. Why should youth be interested in politics? And I hope with this interview, you also got to learn something. With this, I take your leave. I'll definitely see you in the next episode of Nepal Next.